Hey y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and this is my Snohomish County real estate market update for July 2025. What's up, Snohomish County? We are now halfway through the summer, and we're starting to see the inventory leveling out. The last few months, we were seeing more and more houses coming on the market, but we weren't seeing enough buyer activity to keep up. And so we were seeing the amount of houses, the supply of houses on the market building up and increasing. And what we've seen here over the past month is really just the numbers have leveled off. The amount of new listings has slowed down a little bit, and we've also seen the consistent buyer activity, and that's caused the housing market to stop with the ballooning in inventory, which is good because it does keep things a little bit more stable. We're in more of a balanced market right now, and to have that situation, we haven't been in that in a while. So it's nice and refreshing, I think, for buyers to be able to have some ability to negotiate. I think for sellers, it's a little less comfortable, but they're still able to get near or at their asking price. So again, there's just more balance in the negotiations right now. I think buyers are rooting for, and they always are, a buyer's market. Sellers are always rooting for a seller's market. I think a more balanced market is a better place to be swimming if you are looking to buy and sell in general. Now, we are in a place where things could get interesting. Mortgage rates for the past year or so have hovered in that upper sixes, low sevens range. And we are, as of today, Mortgage News Daily was saying at 6.57 for an average 30-year fixed rate loan. And that's a sign of relief, or at least positive sign for buyers. There's a lot of hope that those rates are going to continue trending downwards. A lot of that comes down to the continued inflation data, jobs reports, and what the Fed's ultimately going to do. And as a reminder, the Fed rate does not directly affect the mortgage rates, but there's an indirect correlation here. And as we're looking for September, October, there's rumor that we might see some of those cuts. We haven't seen them yet. And so at this point, I think there's a little bit of hope that's rising up that could cause more buyers to enter the market. And that would then cause a lot of this inventory that's already been building up to disappear pretty quickly. So before I talk about any applications here specifically for buyers and sellers, let's talk about where we're at this month real quick. So year over year, the listings are up 7.7%. So I mentioned we saw fewer listings than we did last month, but if we were to look back at the same month last year, we also saw fewer listings. It's normal to see fewer listings in July than it is to see in June. So again, nothing out of the ordinary here. What we did see was more buyer activity year over year. So 7.5% more buyers. So the buyer activity essentially kept up with the new listing numbers, which hasn't been the case over the past few months, which is why we saw things stabilize a little bit. The amount of pending sales was almost the same as last month. We had 4 fewer pending sales than last month. The amount of closed sales, though, down quite a bit. So last year, 15.1% year over year drop in the closed sales in July. And again, those would have been pendings in June. So we're talking about just how slow the last couple months have been. It is starting to pick up a tiny bit. And again, that's more a matter of perspective when you look at the pending sales and the new listings, right? And things just kind of leveling out. So the days on market, 25 days on market, 19 days on market was last month's number in Snohomish County. So we've seen the days on market increasing. And last year in July, it was 18 days on market. So again, days on market, 25, not that big of a deal. I would say that's fairly normal and almost pretty quick. But I think people are used to seeing their houses selling really quick, 1 week, 2 week. You start to get to 25 days and you go, what the heck's wrong with my house? And again, that's more a perspective from, well, my neighbor sold in a week versus maybe what's actually a good or bad amount of time on the market. So 25 days still relatively quick for a sale. Median sales price up 3.1% year over year at 825. That's also more than the $800,000 number we saw last month. The average sales price, 183, is also up 3.1% year over year and up slightly from 319 last month. So again, prices have really stabilized. They're up a tiny bit, and we've seen the amount of supply. We were talking about that, 2.5 months of inventory versus 2.4 months of inventory last month. And I think the big one here, just thinking about what's my house going to sell for, 99.6% of the asking price versus 0.3% over asking price last month. Last year, listings were selling 0.6% above the asking price. So if we're to look at last month or we're to look at last year, things haven't changed too much as we're looking at these numbers. I think the big takeaway as I'm looking at this for Snohomish County is that we're just seeing things stabilizing a little bit. The past few months, we've been seeing inventory rising. We've been seeing the days on market rising. We've been seeing a lot more listings than buyers. And we, this month, really saw things remain more level. And so we didn't see things getting increasingly less competitive, and we didn't see things getting increasingly more competitive. If you're a buyer, you're excited about the opportunities right now for a purchase with less competition and also a lot more options than the same time last year. Last year, there were 1,158 houses on the market. This year, 1,620 houses on the market, or 39.9% more houses on the market. So for buyers, there are just way more options out there. You're also not necessarily paying over asking price. Maybe you're paying a little bit less than asking price. And I think the imminent hope of rates coming down, I haven't seen the chatter be this excited in a while regarding rates. Now, rates have been lower. They were and have touched the 6% threshold a couple different times over the past few years, very short-lived. And I think there's hope that rates are going to start to trend in that direction. So I think there's hope. I think there's a lot of options. So for buyers, this is a really encouraging time. I would almost say a good time to start considering whether you want to get into the market. The amount of houses will quickly dry up as we hit the fall. And if any of you follow along on a regular basis, if you haven't, you should. But what tends to happen is when you hit the spring market, it's just more competitive all the time. And so if we have less inventory, let's say rates are better, this spring in 2026 could be a fairly competitive housing market, maybe even more so than we've seen in the past few years. Whereas right now, things are relatively calm and equitable for buyers and sellers. So a little bit better buying environment right now. Sellers, I think the past few months have been tough. And I think we're starting to have at least some hope that that buyer activity might be returning. And so I think that's encouraging if you're a seller right now in Snohomish County. Thanks so much for tuning into this month's Snohomish County Real Estate Market Update. If you made it to the end here, I know you got some value out of it. So a couple quick favors. Number one, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you are somebody, number two, that is thinking about maybe making a purchase in one of the great cities here in Snohomish County, I'd love to be a resource for you.